Hello and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. I want to talk about this HITBOX welder that I bought on a Black Friday sale on eBay from the HITBOX eBay store. It's the SYN-MIG200Pro inverter welder multi-process. It does MIG, stick, it'll do TIG, it'll take a spool gun, and of course it'll do flux core. I want to say right off that I am not a professional welder, that this is just a hobby for me and I'm a complete novice, so you won't be seeing any arc shots or beads that I've run because I'm still learning how to do this. But I wanted to talk about some of the things about this welder that they don't tell you in their ads or in the documentation. For one thing is that it is very, very similar to the HZX Vogan HBM 2280 welder. It's, as I understand it, an updated version of that welder. And there are a couple of YouTube videos that go through all the menus, and there's an unboxing of it. But there's a number of things that they don't talk about in those videos that I thought you'd like to know. For one thing, the manual that came with this welder is in about at least 6 languages, none of which are English. I've tried to download the manual in English from their website, but as of yet have not been successful because it asks for a password. And I've messaged them but have not gotten response with a password to get that manual downloaded. But in looking through this book in foreign languages, there does not appear to be a whole lot in the manuals because it's just a few pages in each of many different languages. Something to know about this welder is it does not use Tweco consumables. It uses Benzol consumables. Here you have a contact tip that came with this welder. It's a Benzol contact tip as opposed to the Tweco style contact tips. You'll notice it's a little fatter with then tapers at the end. The Tweco tips will screw right into it, and I did try one. I tried a .023, and it seemed to work just fine. But the ones that come with it are the Benzol styles. It came with a 0.8 millimeter and 2 1.0 millimeter tips. More on that later. It also came with 3 drive rollers. It came with this one that is a 1.0 and a 1.2 U-groove, which I believe is for aluminum. It came with this one, which is a 1.0 and a 0.8 millimeter V-groove. And the one that's in it is a 0.6 and a 0.8 millimeter V-groove for MIG wire. And as you can see, it'll take the 10-pound spools. It'll also take 2-pound spools. And it has a nice all-metal construction drive system. It has a burn back control here, adjustment, and a switch here for a spool gun, to switch a spool gun on and off. And the plug for the spool gun, where you would plug it in, is underneath this cap. The gas nozzles are slit with little fingers that just friction fit onto the MIG gun and go up against this metal stop. Now when I first got it, because it was so tight, it wouldn't go all the way up to the metal stop, and that caused the tip of the contact tip to be recessed into the nozzle, what I thought was too far. But by sliding this band up away from the end to allow these to expand a little more, I was able to get it to go all the way against the stop, or nearly there. But even then, the contact tip was slightly recessed into inside the nozzle. And it's my understanding it should be pretty much flush, definitely not extending, the contact tip should not extend past the end of the nozzle, but it should be about flush. But that's not a big deal. Another thing they didn't tell you about in the other videos and documentation that I looked at was the length of the leads. The MIG gun lead is over 9 feet long, so that I thought was quite good. The stick leads are about 6 feet long. I think 6 feet to the base of the clamp here, and it is a fairly decent clamp with copper mesh and copper contacts inside. It's not super heavy duty, but it's not bad. So I was pleased with that. But there, some of them ones I've seen are only have 5 foot long leads. These are 6, and they use these kind of DINS connectors that you can change around for different polarities, or I've made up my own set of longer leads. In fact, the DINS connectors are the DKJ 3550 style, except that when I made up my own set, they seem to be a little bit longer than these. You notice where the little bump that sticks up there that twists into lock, it's cut off just past it? Well, the ones that I bought extended past that a good 1/4 inch, and I had to cut them off with an angle grinder. So they would go in all the way and then twist and lock. But once I cut them off a little bit, they fit fine and worked fine. I tried it, and it did in fact work. I did not get the spool gun or TIG torch for it, although they sell one. And I showed you inside there is a burn back adjustment, but in playing with that a little bit, not much, I turned it all the way down and still had a little bit of a ball on the end of the MIG wire, and couldn't tell that by turning it all the way up or down that did a whole lot. I could definitely tell when I turned it all the way up, you ended up with more wire sticking out, but I still would have liked it turned it down a little bit more. An interesting part about this whole setup is that, as I said, it came with 2 1mm contact tips and drive rollers for 1mm wire, both hard MIG and aluminum wire. It did not come with a knurled roller for flux core, although I have ordered some. Oh, by the way, the MIG rollers are 30mm diameter with a 10mm keyhole, and they're 10 millimeters thick. And you can find those on eBay or on Amazon, different ones, replacements for that. It has another feature that I did not see in any of the other videos that they didn't talk about. The video on the HBM 2280 shows you all these menus, but something that they didn't show you is that you can go over here to set, and you can set your unit to either metric or imperial. The funny thing is that you don't get imperial on everything, only on the metal thickness, and the wire feed speed is in feet per minute rather than in meters per minute. But the wire diameter and the welding stick diameter is still metric, so that's kind of strange. Another thing that it has is it has VRD. I believe that stands for voltage reduction device, and I think that's for when you're stick welding, it turns the open circuit voltage down so you're less likely to get shocked until it senses the arc start, and then it turns it up, I believe. Again, I'm not a professional welder. That's just kind of what my limited understanding tells me. There's a really strange thing about this welder is that, as you can see here in the menus, it's pretty nice. You can, select your setup as shown, but the other video showed all this same stuff. One thing I don't think they mentioned is if you press and hold this button, it takes you back 1 step. Press and hold it again, takes you back another step, and so forth. Now here's another interesting part about this welder. It has settings for 1mm MIG wire. Also, if you go over to flux core, it has settings, so let's see if I can get a better picture, of 0.8 and 1mm flux core wire. The interesting part is that I have not been able to find anywhere in looking on the internet anybody that sells 1mm ER70S-6 MIG wire, except in 33-pound rolls, which will not fit in this machine, unless you want it shipped from Australia and pay the shipping from Australia, or England and pay the shipping from England. You cannot find 1mm hard MIG wire that will fit in this machine. So I'm not sure why it's set up for that and why they sent 1mm contact tips for it when you can't get MIG wire for it that size. Now you can get flux core wire in 1mm. It's not real common, but I have found .040 flux core wire that you can get on the internet. But I've never seen it in a store anywhere, but you can order it. It just seems strange that this thing seems to be geared toward 1mm wire when you can't find it. It does have a couple interesting features that I don't think they talked about on the other videos. Is it has in the MIG mode, it has an inductance setting. Okay, this setting here is inductance. Now I run CO2 gas, straight CO2, and from what I've seen on YouTube videos, if you're running straight CO2, they say that it tends to run a little better with the inductance setting set up quite a ways. And my brief experiments seem to confirm that, so I have mine set to 8. But again, I'm new at this. I don't know what I'm doing. The other thing that it has that they didn't talk about in the other videos that I saw, this is where you set whether it's 6011 or 7018 or whatever kind of rod you're using, 6000 series or 7000 series. And this is the rod thickness. This would be 1/8 inch. This setting up here, if I'm not mistaken, that is arc force setting. And I've just got mine set mid-range. I haven't played with that much. But that's another feature that this welder has. In addition to inductance setting for MIG, it has arc force setting on stick. I was hoping that it had hot start adjustment, but I have not found that it does. So I was a little disappointed in that, but that seems to be the case. Now another question that they never talked about in any of the other videos I saw is this welder is rated at 200 amps when running on 240 volt power on MIG, and 170 amps when running on stick. I put on my clamp-on amp meter and tested it, and it does in fact put out about that. My amp meter, I set it to the peak function or max function, where it recorded the maximum reading when I was welding with it, and it hit over 210 amps on MIG with it cranked up. And on stick, it hit over around 180 amps, running on 240 volts. The other thing they don't tell you anything about at all is what power it puts out on 120 volts. I put my meter on it running on 120 volts, and on MIG, it would hit about, max out at about 130 amps, and on stick, it maxed out at about 120 amps running on 120 volt power. So it will put out plenty of power. When running on 240 volt, it does pretty much what they say it will do from what I can tell. So the welder seems to be, fairly well built, solid, nice finish and fit. Quite pleased with it so far. Another thing you need to be aware of that nobody talks about that I have seen in these videos is if you want to run this on 240 volt and you don't already have a 240 volt outlet, that could be expensive to put one in. I've got this set up in my garage, and I had to run. I bought a 70-foot piece of number 8 wire to run for the outlet, and I used all but, I cut off less than 2 feet of wire excess from my 70-foot run. The wire alone was $140. The circuit breaker for it was a 40 amp circuit breaker, was around $15, and the plug itself was around $15. So it cost me around $170, not counting staples and other miscellaneous odds and ends, to put the outlet in for this thing. So if you don't already have a 240 volt outlet and you're thinking of running that, that can be expensive. Now you can get, and I bought a 50-foot number 8 wire welder extension cord. So if you don't want to run a long outlet, you can buy an extension cord, 50-foot extension cord. But that was like $130 or so for the extension cord. But that's just, that's an option. Oh, I didn't show you the stinger or electrode holder for stick welding. It's nothing to write home about, but it's not bad. As you can see, I've used it. It does work. Kind of typical for these kind of welders. So nothing wrong with it. It works. So at any rate, that's just, I'm hoping that that answers questions that people have that aren't talked about in any of the documentation or the other YouTube videos that I have seen. Don't talk about a lot of these things, and I hope that answers some of your questions. Have a good day.